Chairperson, I wanted to sort of just touch, given the 10 minutes, just a few things and examples to say, yes, there is room to forgive, but not to forget. But we need to know whom to actually forgive. Without knowing who you're going to forgive, perhaps we should say you start with yourself and forgive yourself for not knowing whom to forgive. And I wanted to cover the aspect of finding common ground to cleaning these poisoned relationships. Forgive yourselves as much as South Africans have forgiven themselves. And some people say South Africans should have killed each other at the altar of negotiation. I'm talking recently, 94. But where would we be in the world of human rights now if we did that? Would we have found common ground? And of course, the leaders didn't really care. You could kill each other, the leaders don't care. But if they can simply say they are sorry for having perpetrated that, we will go a long way. Because we can't develop going forward when we still see each other as enemies, whereas the real enemy is still smoking a cigar somewhere and praying for you to kill each other.
And now I hope that Dr. Minyuku is receiving us loud and clear. Dr. Minyuku, can you unmute yourself? It's your turn to come in, please.
Thank you, Chair. What can one say after what we have been so well informed about? Perhaps as an insider-outsider, African, of South African origin, I must place my comments outside of the box, but in context. And I'm hoping to make very few comments so that you can remember them for a very long time. But having said that, once you talk about time, it has to be relative to purpose. And one crucial thing about today is that for me, this is the beginning of an everlasting thing of beauty, equaling dialogue. So many of us don't want to actually engage one another and just simply understand the basic things in life. I said, let me place my comments outside of the box. I also wanted to say that today is tomorrow's yesterday. I appreciate the fact that we would want to look forward. But the first thing I would like to indicate is that there are striking similarities between, we may call them, for example, we can say the troubled relationships between, if I'm allowed to say so, troubled relationships between the two nations that you're talking about. From a South African perspective, I would even say poisoned relationships. But let me indicate why I say poisoned relationships. It's because on one end, we are talking about truth. And truth is painful. And it's not cheap. If you imagine from what Timothy has just said, truth may be cathartic to those people that actually are survivors. Some of us may even call them victims. No, they are survivors. But speaking truth is not necessarily speaking it to power. It is a form of catharsis for them in order to deal with the future going forward. And you need platforms like this to be able to speak truth even to power. Imagine if we say that there are politics of encroachment in this poisoned relationship, but we do not want to confront the perpetrators who poisoned the relationship. It is almost like saying that let's feel good about talking and absolutely do nothing about things that affect us on a daily basis. So if truth is that painful and not cheap, it means we need to confront our realities. Now, I'm saying that includes confronting the reality of those who poisoned the relationships. Now, coming from South Africa, if I was Meryl Streep, I'll demonstrate what the Prime Minister of Britain, Maggie Thatcher, said, but I'm not Meryl Streep. She literally said, you cannot enjoy, and remember she was promoting a system of apartheid. She was saying you cannot put the Zulus and the Xhosas together. These are belligerents, according to her. In fact, they will be at each other's throats. They would never enjoy the peace dividend. From what I know, and I'm not even a historian, I just know as a South African, there have never been any war between the Zulus and the Xhosas in South Africa. Any war that I know of record. But some South African listening, they probably can point at one or two skirmishes. But those will be normal skirmishes. Now, imagine an outsider telling South Africans that they can never be peace. Maggie Thatcher actually referred to the Xhosas as ex-Xhosas. She couldn't say Xhosas, as if they are not human beings. We still are suffering that legacy up till now. The history of Maggie Thatcher is very recent. The history of apartheid is recent as 1948. But the history of racism starts real back through the history of social contact. I wanted to indicate that whilst there are striking realities that has been mentioned, South Africa has suffered triple oppressions, maybe even more than triple. For that matter, when we look at the comments and my comments and what has been said, the first thing that I really wanted to indicate is that off the record, our good professor mentioned the Asaba massacre. I may not be able to put it in context, but I can juxtapose the Traspit massacre in KZN in South Africa, the Bishop massacre in the Eastern Cape. Remember, KZN is where the Zulus are, Eastern Cape is where the Xhosas are, but those massacres were not perpetrated by one against another. They were perpetrated by the system and the legacy that we've inherited. So poisoned water need to be unpoisoned. And how do you do it? Here is a platform that has been established. You need to create an environment. In this case, maybe it's an environment and a climate. It is this platform as an example of openness, transparency, and full disclosure so that you can deal with the future. As long as there is no full disclosure, you're not going to be able to deal with the future. You'll not be able to cleanse any wound that was caused. Having said what I have said, I'm tempted to also indicate that if you just chop an onion, the pungent smell is going to get into your eyes. That's different from when you enjoy when that onion is already braised, it's fried, and you are not even thinking about the pungent smell. Now, most of what we are talking about now lies with the political conflicts of the past. How do you deal with the political conflict of the past? I cannot claim to have solutions at the back of my hand, because there is no off the peg way of dealing with such things. But we can learn examples from other places, including South Africa. It could be an example where we can learn something from. Now, I would want to say that a national apology, when people and a country are then put on a brink. In the case of Nigeria, it was actual war. In the case of South Africa, it was at the brink of a precipice. Without that national apology, you're not going to be able to address those political conflicts of the past. You're not going to be able to hold this dialogue, both here as well as in Nigeria, and succeed. In fact, some of the leaders who were there, I'm leading to the second point, that it requires leadership and leadership. Some of the leaders are still alive. Our good professor mentioned Obasanjo is still alive. And if you care to imagine that these things are solvable, we have had some examples of how to deal with it from Timothy here, then what are we still waiting for? We were lucky in South Africa. We had a constitutional mandate because we had to start afresh. And the Constitution of South Africa, actually the preamble of that constitution, is the founding act of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa solved all the problems of South Africa. But it did put all of us on one page to reckon with our political conflicts of the past. And it is, you cannot sneeze at it, because you have human rights violations that have been verified, Timothy, verified by both perpetrators and the victims or the survivor at the same time. So you can't sneeze at that. Neither do you have a situation where you have politicians that then declare we shall have a truth commission by way of an executive order. Ours was the function of a constitutional mandate. Now, you don't have many like that in the world, because the world already has evolved. South Africa was just beginning. So we were fortunate to be at the beginning. Perhaps next to South Sudan, we are the only country with a flag that has got 6 colors. So I'll leave that for your own imaginations. I wanted to also say that let's not leave this issue of leadership and leadership. That is not only speaking about age or ageism. Even amongst the youth, we do need to make sure that we mentor those who have got a potential to lead, principled leaders. Because otherwise, we will keep on being revisionist, hoping the past will become today and tomorrow. Let me mention my last point. In summary, somebody said to me, and perhaps I should declare, it is my president, and I'm not being sacrilegious. My president is my wife. She said to give, and use the word, the number 2, to give, and to get, 2, the number 2, get, are so easy. And historically, they've been so easy that some people have never bothered about the generosity of spirit they deal with. They come into the area, and I think our good professors have indicated that, with a Bible in one hand and a gun in another, and they just take without being apologetic. But we have to be apologetic when they have poisoned our relationships. That must stop so that we move forward with confidence. Now, how does it stop? Forgive. Now add the number 4 and say forgive and forget. You can forgive, but you must never forget. And I think this is the message coming from Timothy. And what is it that which you can forget if you are a centered African? Very few things that you can forget. That even includes your history. Your essence of life is actually your history. That's why I said today is tomorrow, yesterday. And it is important that we actually think out of this box where I am and accept that there is a place to study history. And I believe it was actually, again, our good professor, Nwanze, who said, unless you want to be victims of the same error that has been perpetrated and committed in the past, you will then not want to study and understand history. I said, I understand that we have to transition into the future, but then we must transition by bracing that onion. First, we need to understand that onion has got a pungent smell. And how do we fumigate the pungent smell? It takes that leadership. It takes this dialogue session that must move from Zoom to the actual environment back home. It actually takes even exploring alternative forms of justice. Truth and reconciliation commissions are nothing else but alternative forms of justice. If the outcome is not justiciable, then you must know that you still have a long way to go. I want to conclude by going back on that point and hope that I have saved a little bit of time to say that politics of encroachment shouldn't make us to actually quickly accept that we created problems. We should simply accept that they are problems of our own and own them, but also own the processes going forward of resolving such problems. It can be done. Let me thank everybody as well, and hope that I have added a little bit value outside this box.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Minyuku.